Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Pegi Robinson. Today's guest is Heather Tesch, and she has just started a podcast about near-death experiences called Beyond with Heather Tesch, correct?
That is correct. Hello. Thank you so much, Peggy, for having me on your show. I so appreciate it.
Well, you are so cool because you are a former meteorologist. Like I saw the videos of you on the news talking about the weather, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to go from meteorologist to having a YouTube on near-death experiences. So, can you tell us how you got to that point?
Sure. Well, first of all, I've always been fascinated with spiritual things and near death experiences ever since I heard about near death experiences, which was probably in my late teens. So I grew up in a family with four sisters, and then I went to college, got married right out of college, and my husband was in the military. So my first career, I've had three careers now. My first one was as a broadcast journalist. So I did the news, reported in various places because my husband moved around a lot. And my first job, I was on TV and I was getting $5 an hour. So it's not quite as glamorous as people think sometimes. But I did that for a few years, and I realized that news wasn't really my thing. There's a lot of negativity. There's sad things in the news, and I really found myself drawn to the meteorologists I work with and what they were doing. So then I went back to school and I got my degree in meteorology. And so then I worked at a few different places um, as a meteorologist, was in Minneapolis, which is where I'm from. My husband got out of the Navy and then we moved to Minneapolis. I thought that I would be there forever. But then the Weather Channel came calling. And so I ended up deciding to come to Atlanta, Georgia, and work for the Weather Channel. And that was a wonderful experience. And I was on a morning show there with Marshall Cease, who was the best partner in the world. And we did a morning show for 10 years there. And then after that, I started working in digital TV. So, or I should say digital broadcast forecasting meteorology. So that would be the Weather Channel Digital.
Okay, that's a first. It totally choked. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. Do you want me to continue on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I went to the Weather Channel Digital, and that's what you would see on your phone. And then after right around the time COVID hit, I really started to think that I wanted to do a podcast. But I held off for a while because there were already great people like you that were doing this. And so I knew I had to bring something a little different to it somehow. But actually, ours are very similar, though. But I really started wanting to do this. And finally, I was talking to my husband, and, he said, if you're ever going to do it, you better do it now, or you're not going to do it. So, and in May, early May, was my last day doing the Weather Channel Digital. And then, like 3 days later, I put up my first video, and I've got 30 out at this point. This is August of 2023.
That's good.
Yeah, so
That's
it's really
busy.
exciting. I'm just loving it. I love people like you that I get a chance to talk to. You are all so informative, and you're all such great people. So it really has been a wonderful experience, and I'm hoping that it's getting out there and people are just getting something good out of it. I feel like, there is a lot of negativity in this world, but I feel like things like this can really change that, and it can really open up people's hearts. And so that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm sure you are too.
Yeah. I'll get you back on here with me. Yeah, I just think it's so cool because it's like we're bringing, I don't know, like what we consider the news, people we see on the news. Not that I was in your state and watched your channel, but or the Weather Channel,
Although
but
that was national.
oh, okay.
Yeah, that was national.
Yeah, the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Just like to bring it to near death experience, it just kind of says how popular near death experiences are becoming.
Yes. And, certainly I was interested in them when I first started my career in television, but there was not a place for them. There was not podcasts, there was not YouTube.
Right.
And also, it wasn't quite as acceptable back then. I mean, I still think some of my friends think I'm probably a little out there. And certainly, some of my viewers that are used to me being a scientist are maybe having a harder time wrapping their head around this. Some love it because it's their interest too, and others are like, nah, not my thing, and that's fine. But yeah, it's great to be able to do this. I feel very blessed.
I feel like faces like yours, personalities and the background you have like yours is maybe going to get near death experiences taken more seriously.
Maybe I hope so, and I just think it's obviously it's not just me. I mean, you've got tens of thousands of subscribers. I think that the interest is growing, and I do think that the more people start to get exposed to it, the more they're like, wow, that is kind of interesting. And so I do think that more and more people will start to watch these and get interested.
And I think it is science. I think it is a science that hasn't developed yet, that I hope will catch on some serious scientists and actually say, okay, let's really seriously start looking at this and get it out of the paranormal field.
Yes,
It's
I
my
would
hope.
agree. I would agree. And there are things that people have experienced that are provable. Um, I know that, you during your near death experience, you were able to observe certain things. And some people have been able to, have other people say, yes, that's exactly what happened. So there is evidence, but it's hard because, science thinks everything's false until they prove it, or some people think that. But the truth is, there is so much out there that science still doesn't know. I mean, it's always a learning process. And I do think that this is one of those things that will become better understood over time. Let's hope so.
It was probably only about 7 years ago that I discovered IANS, the International Association
Mm-hmm.
for Death Studies. And I had these rose colored glasses. I mean, huge rose colored glasses looking at this organization, thinking, assuming I knew what it was. And actually now I learned, well, it was that at one time, but it's not anymore. And they claim to be the science of near death experiences. It's not. I mean, I just watched a video of IANS video. It's on YouTube, of the president of IANS saying how ketamine will give you a true near death experience. And I'm like, that's a date rape drug. That's hallucinogen. And so I'm like, crap, what's happening here? This is what we depended on to bring out the science of near death experiences, to get them taken seriously. And we have just dropped off the edge here, went straight down, in my opinion, when we go taking hallucinogens and saying, this is a true near death experience. They said, based on the Bruce Grayson scale, that you take this little survey of your NDE, a self survey, and then based on these numbers, whether you had a true NDE. And she says, this guy had this true NDE. I'm like, nah. And I think they're totally, in my opinion, and it's not just that, and it's just not them. I see it everywhere, even as far as include these podcasts that are including UFOs and Bigfoot and everything that's just entertaining. Throw it in there with near death experiences. And when I first got involved in a NDE group years ago, I was like, so fascinated to get in this. And I heard the leader of group, I overheard her talking that she was at some conference and nearby, and that's town she lived. So I looked it up, and it was UFO and palm reading and channeling. And in my mind, in my Christian upbringing, I'm thinking, why are you putting God in a circus tent? Like, to me, for me, these are Christian. These, and even if an atheist comes on, tells me they're NDE and doesn't see God in it, doesn't see Jesus in it, I see it. When they're told it's not your time yet, you got to go back, or they're shown something that will benefit them on down the road and throughout their life. There's this higher intelligence, no matter what a person calls it, that is in charge of these. And that's where I think the science is getting to understand our creator.
Yes, and I would say that, with any organization, people are going to have different opinions and different ideas, but there are still, like, I've talked to people in IONS, and I've met some great people that are involved with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're not always going to agree with people, and sometimes it's their opinion. And I hadn't heard that about what you said, but I've heard of those ketamine and things more so used for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, that sort of thing, because when they're guided with some sort of a person to help them, a counselor of some sort,
Right.
they can have some good benefits of just
Under
becoming
physician
less,
care. Mm-hmm.
becoming less depressed and so forth. So I suppose, with any organization, we're not always going to agree, but then there are still a lot of good people.
Right. And that's not my point. What I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not throwing anybody under the bus or anything under the bus. What I'm saying is that there has to be science in this. There has to be guidelines. There has to be ethics, as with any other scientific study. If you and I were both doctors and we're discussing, say we're both gynecologists and we're talking about cervical cancer, I can't just say, well, lollipops cure cancer. And you be a serious doctor, a scientist, and like, I'm sorry, where's the research to back that up? And to me, that's what this field is there's so much fake and flake and everything that comes down the pike that just gets views, that just sells tickets into conferences, that becomes the focus in this science and not real factual science. I mean, yeah, every year, every guest I have on will tell their experience, and they'll say, well, should I not say this? Some people say, don't say God and Jesus. And I'm like, hey, you tell your story. I have no filter for you. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your truth. And I may have some a little, I don't know, that I might keep to myself, or my expression gives me away. I do not have a poker face. I never have. But still, it's like I am just like begging the whole community to find a way to make this actual science, like the weather. There's a science that says whatever about the weather. I wouldn't have a clue, to give an example. But
even in the weather, people will disagree. They'll look at the same information and maybe come up with a slightly different forecast. Some people have a little more knowledge, others have more to learn. So
there is a guideline, I'm sure. It's not like, look at the sky, look at the clouds. I think there's going to be a tornado today. There is actual,
Wouldn't that be nice if we had that power? Oh, let's see, I'm going to make it 80 degrees and sunny today.
I don't know. I just wish that it could be taken more seriously. I wish there was a like a manual. This is what the science say, and not written by people that have an agenda. But you can't go to college and take a class on near-death experiences. Say get the definitions and get those examples and get to where we can even begin to put this in a scientific text. I mean, sure, there's people out there saying they're NDE researchers And some of them, I don't know how they can call themselves a researcher at all, yet alone NDE researcher, but they have done it for 40 years. And they will handpick a few to then present their agenda. Like, I just watched Lee Whitting, NDE Radio, the other day, and he is just going off saying about abortion, how near-death experiences prove that abortion is okay because the baby near-death experiencers say that they like communicated with babies on the other side, and those babies wanted aborted, reincarnated later. And I know a famous NDE that draws in big crowds that's saying exactly that. And they're all saying sort of forms of that. And then I talked to the vice president of IONS the other day, and Martin Tanner, and I just love him. He is a Christian, and he is, I take my concerns to him. Say, hey, Martin, look at this. Ketamine, seriously? Abortion, really? Seriously? In NDEs? And the woman that Lee Whitting was interviewing wasn't even NDE. She channels chickens and talks about UFOs, and she's been on there several times. Has nothing to do with NDEs, but they're using NDEers now, and have been for some time, to promote their political agenda. They can start out like 2017. Lee introduced me to talk about my NDE, and I'd been on there on 16. Because when you get your book done, come back on. So now it's 17. I'm in there, and I'm all excited. He read my book the night before, and my interview is all about Trump. He's bashing Trump and talking about Trump's a sexual abuser and stuff, because there was sexual abuse as a child in the beginning of my book. And so I didn't want to talk about my sexual abuse as a child on the radio. Yeah, it's in my book, but I was not prepared, nor did he have my permission to discuss that. And no more than I'm probably doing you a disservice because you didn't come on to talk about this. I didn't either. But I just think, go ahead. It's just not, there's no ethics.
Well, I think, that's the point of, you can have your podcast and do with it and take it in the direction that you feel is right. And that's probably why there are various ones out there. And so we all probably take a different spin on this. And some of them, near-death experiences might not be their main focus, but it's something they add on to their podcasts. So, yeah, I think we just have to focus on what we think is the best way to do it and what we think is right in our heart, and then do that on our podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to be, I saw your shows you've done so far, and you're very professional, and it's very well done, and it's so nice.
Thank you so much.
It is very nice. And they're not going to get this Pegi drama that I bring to the table.
But what's neat about you is you're not shy to share your personality. And I think there's probably a lot of viewers that think that's refreshing, that you say what you think. So again, I think we all kind of bring something a little bit different to our shows, and hopefully, people find what they're looking for when they're out there searching.
Yeah. And the people that, like to just like stare at a screen like TV, and, oh, NDE, cool. Oh, Bigfoot, cool. Oh, UFO, cool. That's just like there's cartoons, and then there's CNN, there's a whole variety of people with different interests.
Right.
And sure, I will say too, that I have noticed that female NDE podcasters, and I don't know if that's podcasters in general, but it seems like we just don't get the attention that the male podcasters do. And, you see that in music too, that the male singers just seem to draw in more crowd. I've heard I like country, or I like Christian music. I don't listen to the hard stuff much, but I've heard them say that over the years too. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's what's going on here. The men like to see the men, and the women like to see the men. And women, I think, they just are too hard on women.
You just need to break through that ceiling then. And those of us that are women, we just need to get out there. And I think times are changing. I think many things were very male dominated, but I do feel like that is changing over time. And nothing happens like that. Things do take time, but if you do a great job, people are going to come. And yes, there could be some things out there, but you never know. There might be other reasons or other things, just the amount of videos they put out, or maybe that they have some crazier topics that people like, not necessarily the NDE audience, but maybe they have a wider audience. I'm not sure.
Have you yourself experienced any spiritual experiences of any kind, or in
I
your
have had
family?
I have had spiritual experiences for sure. I've not had a near-death experience or anything on that level that I know of. But I've had things that were important to me that happened, yes. And I think if we look for them, there's always lots of small things. And I think you've realized that too, because you get these knowings, this intuition that you've actually saved lives because of it.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like the double-edged sword is, in one way your intuition is helpful, and the other way is a curse, because you lose your filter and you shoot from the hip, and especially as you get older. I mean, I just love becoming older. I mean, women around me, they're talking about face creams and exercise and diets. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what a waste of time. Let's talk about what we really think and what we're really going through. And come on. and and so it's a double-edged sword, because I mean, there is I guess a level of professionalism people expect when they watch a podcast, and I think most people are so used to watching television, everything's pre-scripted.
Although I do think podcasts are different, that they do expect a much more relaxed atmosphere. And I think I've actually watched podcasts. There was one that I watched a lot. It was a meteorologist. And as he grew, he got more and more fancy and slick with his graphics. And it actually kind of turned me off a little bit. I liked more of just the average Joe getting out there and sharing, his or her knowledge when it wasn't so polished. And so I do think there's a difference between the two, within reason. I mean, you have to have it somewhat polished, but I do think it's definitely a different media. And I love the fact that it's much more casual than when I worked in television. And I like that you can really let your personality show, and you do that. And I think that's really what attracts people.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
why
they
you've
tell
got a
me I
big
need to shut
audience.
up too.
No, you've got a big audience. People are enjoying that. And I just think the fact that you're interviewing all of these near-death experiencers, it's such a service that you are benefiting so many lives that are hearing this. And even if they don't agree with everything either you say or everything somebody
Right.
else says, they still are getting something out of it. And I think it's almost the accumulation of near-death experiences. Nobody has the answer. Nobody's come back and said, oh, this is how it is. Or if they do, I mean, they generally realize it's much more than that. It's a piece of the puzzle. And I feel that way, that it's having listened to so many of these over the years and reading so many books. That's how it started to change me and open me up. And I just think it brings a lot of positive things if people keep getting exposed to it and keep being reminded of the love that's out there and how important love is and that connection to God. And so I think what you're doing it's really great work and touching a lot of lives.
Thank you. And it actually turned into something that like it becomes a life of its own, like you'll find out with your podcast. Like for me, where I'm just blunt and open and I'm not afraid to explore topics and confront. Um, I get a lot of calls and messages, emails. Peggy, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? When they see something that's not right, or
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about this? And like just last night, someone sent me something of an NDE that I just adore, and this one part right here, do you think he meant that he's God? And I listened to it. And I was like, no, that's not what he was saying. That's not what he meant. He was giving praise to Jesus. And if it sounded like that's what he was saying, like, chill, that's not what. And so I'm happy to get that and clarify things for people and smooth things, or they can get me wound up like, oh my gosh, like that is horrible. And even when I first started, I got COVID several months in, and somebody contacted me and said, Peggy, somebody's using NDE TV. Like they
Oh,
took my
wow.
name and was using it. And here I am so sick with COVID, and I had to deal with this legally and
Wow.
confront this podcaster. And they were advertising their conference, NDE TV presents, and then their conference. I'm
Wow.
like, what if they take all those ticket sales and leave the country? They're going to come after NDE TV. And why are you using my name? Don't use my name. So I had to secure my name and fight this and get it taken down. I had COVID. And so it does put you, and I think you'll see, that it does put you out there. It puts a face, a contact for people. And, or hey, have this one on your show.
Yeah.
Also too, men like to in the beginning like to contact me and tell me how I need to do it better. I need to do it like this, I need to do it like that. And I was
Yes.
snotty. I mean, I regret it now, but I like was snotty. It was like, I don't need a man telling me. I work for myself now.
Sometimes people reach out and they'll ask me a question. And I mean, I don't have the answers. I interview people that have the answers. And so what I've done is I've said, that's a great question. Let me ask somebody who's had a near-death experience. And so I'll save it. And then I'll ask an upcoming guest. And they can do a much better job than I can. But I do think once you've heard a lot of these, as you have, and I've certainly heard and read a lot of them, you do start to put, everything together, and you do get a bigger picture. And I do think it gives us more answers. And, that's, I think, the great thing about having you and so many others out there doing this, because everyone just tells a little different story, and you just pick up a little nugget sometimes from somebody. You're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like the other day, I was interviewing somebody. Her name was Sharon, and she said something really interesting because, many of us pray. And those of you that have had near-death experiences, you definitely feel probably a better connection because you've seen or you've felt God in a different way than we have. And she said, well, Jesus is your partner. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it, because I think I always felt like I was on my own, but I'd ask for help. Hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this?
Is
But
that
when you
Sharon
actually,
Milliman?
no,
Okay.
she's got a really difficult last name. Let's
Oh,
see.
okay.
Let me see. I think I've got it here. It's Sharon Sananda Kumara who told
Okay.
me that. And I just thought that was a really great thing. I do feel like I pick up a little bit of knowledge each time. And I think that makes life a little easier when you think of God as our partner. And the world is so big. There are 8 billion people almost on the planet, that sometimes we feel very small. But as many of you who have near-death experiencers have learned, to God, he's really got a very one-on-one relationship with all of us.
Heather, your channel should be on TV. It shouldn't be a podcast. You are going to be amazing.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet and you're so kind. And I have to tell this to all of your viewers. And this is how kind you are. I mean, you have this big podcast. I'm brand new. I've minute a number of subscribers as to you. And you reached out to me and you said, hey, I really like to help podcasters. I like to help people that are new. And that is just something that just shows how kind people like you are. And hopefully your viewers always recognize that.
And I really apologize. I know I have made you uncomfortable and put you on the spot by being so open. And you are, man, you're professional. Like you dodged every bullet. Like, and I do. I could see you on television
Oh,
with
you're so
an
sweet.
actual TV program doing what we're all doing on podcasts. Like it
You
needs to
are,
be on television. You have the voice, you have the personality, professionalism, the poise. I mean, I don't know. I looked into, I don't know, it might not be no good, but I looked at a Roku before, like you can actually get on a Roku channel. And I don't know if
mhm.
it's BS or if it's actually a legit thing for people to really consider. But if I had your skill, I think I would seriously, maybe not Roku. I don't know because it may not be legit, but you need
Well,
to be like Netflix or something.
well, thank you so much. I mean, that's really encouraging because I feel new and I feel like I've got a long way to go with this podcast, but I so appreciate that. It's just encouraging when you hear that kind of thing. And I really appreciate it very much. So thank you. That's very kind of you to say that.
In fact, my last guest, Todd, um, which I haven't been on here for, I think it was a little while ago, it was 10 days. So, but he was my last guest I had. And he is working on, I don't know if you saw it, but he's working on making a film
I think I might have
for
seen that.
near death experiences.
Hmm.
And I'm going to tell him about you. And
Oh,
I'm going to
thank
send
you.
him a link to your podcast
You are
and
so
say,
sweet.
you need to be incorporated in that. Because I think that's what his show that he's working on, his film needs is someone with your face, with your voice and your poise and professionalism. Um, and I don't know. I just feel like, girl, that I don't know. I just see you in a higher position in all this than a podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. And but podcasts are really the thing now, and I do think that a lot of people find them and it's very helpful. And again, thank you so much. It's so encouraging. And sometimes as a new podcaster, you need that encouragement. So I appreciate it very much.
And I've seen a lot of them that I've helped come on, and I've seen a lot of them fail, and they were excellent. Like they were so much better than mine. They had the graphics and the music, and it looked like a real TV show. And like, why did
Well,
it fail?
but again, I would say that the graphics isn't always the thing you need with a
Yeah,
podcast. And I think a lot of people watch you because they like you. Obviously, they do. You've got a big audience and they like the way that your style is. And everybody's got a little bit different style. So, and as far as people failing, I think a lot of people give up because it's hard to grow an audience. I mean, it's very hard. You can have a great message, but if nobody's listening to it, it's not getting out there. And so I can see where people give up, and I have no intention of doing that. I'm
yeah.
really enjoying this,
Well, I did.
but
I gave up the other day, and thanks to you, I'm back on here. I'm like, I canceled all my appointments. I'm not going to do this anymore. And you said, well, I'll leave Friday open. That was so smart. I'm like,
well, I'm glad you
okay.
did, and I'm sure it gets frustrating at times because if you have somebody that really throws you off as a guest in a way that you're not sure if you believe them, that sort of thing, that's very uncomfortable. And and then also, like you said, if there's negative things, and I think we really have to focus on the good. And another person I interviewed recently, Vinny Tolman, it was really interesting because he said something that also stuck with me. He said, if you can focus on positive 80% of the time, but if 20% of the time, you're going, oh no, and you're thinking negative things and you're putting a lot of energy into that, that really can overtake the positive things. And I have to watch myself with that because I can think, positive, or I really want to focus, on good things. But sometimes my mind will wander in other directions. And it's really training to train your mind to not do that and to keep
Yeah.
turning off that voice in your head that you don't want to hear.
And I agree with that completely. Um, it's like I have this really high, and a spiritual, really feeling in contact with God as I go about my day. And then I can get in this negative slump that I can't get out. But then again, I think that negative, if we, instead of just like pushing it away, we got to be positive to take it and like, okay, what am I looking at here? What am I struggling with? And how can I deal with it, incorporate it into my life to make it better? Because there's something negative going on here that I'm not addressing, instead of just pushing away, just like everything I just talked about in the last 40 minutes, all those negative things. Are they, I can ask myself, oh, that's negative. I shouldn't focus on negative. Everybody wants to hear up and positive. But yet again, they're important. They're important to me. They're important to my audience because well, I'll just come out and be honest. Week ago, this is why I was just going to quit throwing the towel, is because I had someone I was so excited, and I won't name names, to be on my show. The bio was amazing. Like, I can't believe this person's going to be on my show. And I feel that way about most of my guests. And but 2 hours before I had him on, which I often do, I'll do some research, and so it's all fresh in my memory who this is. All I saw was one red flag after another. And I realized this was an imposter. And this is an imposter that is hurting people. Like, he is offering a service that he is not qualified to offer. And he is saying that he was like way overqualified to offer this service. And the more the investigator in me was coming out, and the more I dug, because when I get on something, I'll pick it clean. I just got to keep going. And I just kept picking at this. I ended up I contacted the person and told him my findings and gave him a chance to, and what he sent me confirmed my findings as his proof. And I'm uninviting you. I'm canceling your appointment. And I continued digging. It wasn't good enough, because he has been doing this for 20 years. He's going to be hurting the public. This is someone that's going on TV, television, news shows, and other shows. And they're doing art. He's like this hero, and he does not have these qualifications. And I'm thinking of all the people he is hurting. And I'm leaving out a lot of identifying information because, but within a few hours after I canceled his appointment, and that's why I wasn't going to do this anymore, because it's such a big responsibility, because I love my audience. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to have a guest on that they're going to think is, oh, wow, they're so great, and they're going to do this service and be harmed.
But you did your due diligence, and you researched it. And I think that's the key, is before we have guests on, we really need to get to know that guest before we even interview them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you're doing, a bunch at once, and you're just taking everybody at face value. But this was something that I couldn't look away. I mean, there's a lot of services I'm thinking, yeah, right. You talk to angels and you're going to charge people on their credit card for talking to angels. I don't know. I have to let it go. I mean, it's not my business. But this was something different. This is something that actually contacted the medical review board and to see if they actually had the license they're claiming to have. And they immediately got back with me and said, no, they do not report this to law enforcement. So I did. I had gathered enough evidence within a few hours that morning that I had enough, and I contacted law enforcement, who contacted me right away, and they turned it over to their special investigations unit. And then now I have journalists contacting me, because this person has been on their news show. This person has a picture of them with the mayor of this city. And this person claims that they have these, they are treating mental health wise, and training the Pentagon, and the military, the senators and governors' families. And this person is completely lost their mind, and people are falling for it.
And that's the sad thing, because if there are people out there, and I'm sure there are, obviously, that are sharing false stories, it takes away from the people that are genuine and had a true experience. And that's sad, because then it casts doubt on other stories. And there are a lot of doubters out there, and this doesn't help.
And this person is treating people. And they were going, if I didn't pay attention, uh, if I didn't have my feelers out, I would have had this guest on and people would have been calling him for this treatment.
And that's what's,
And he tells people to go off their medication because he's going to cure them
oh,
in 5 to
wow.
20 minutes. Go off your medication.
Wow.
And
That, that sounds like some of the clickbaity things that you see on YouTube that they sort of exaggerated in their snapshot, what's going to come across in it. And, this is going to cure you for the rest of your life if you do this one thing. And unfortunately, people are desperate because, we all have issues. We all have problems. People have health problems and they're searching for answers.
I had a guest right before she came on my show, as we're chit chatting before we come on, said that a popular podcaster told her, says, your services will skyrocket once you're on my show. And she says, he was right. They did. Went through the roof. Are these legit services? And I'm learning that some people are thinking, because NDEs are getting popular, the podcasts are getting popular, and your stuff you're trying to sell isn't going anywhere. It's like they've all got together and got this idea. Well, go on a podcast, say you had a near-death experience, and your sales will go through the roof. And that's what's going on
And
right now.
I have had people that I thought they've had a fascinating story, but then when I did a little research into them, I wasn't comfortable with other things I learned. And sometimes it's just their behavior on social media. And so I'm like, you know what? It might be true, but I'm just not going to chance it. I'm not going to have them on.
Yeah. And, I know a lot of people don't have me on because, listen to me, right? Like if I see something, I say something. That's just I have this little I have a little law enforcement inside of me that and it never stops. And so if you don't want something out, they don't want me on their show. And a lot of them won't have me on because I'm Christian. They're trying to keep Christians completely off the radar. They actually tell people, don't say God, don't say Jesus, if you're going to tell about your NDE. And I even had them call my guests after they were on my show and said, if you will leave God, Jesus out of it, we'll have you in this conference and you'll be a speaker. And they're like, no.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure some do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like the more you do something, the more you learn your craft, right? And so
Right.
I'm at that point where I've been doing it over 2 years, and I was just talking on a podcast the other day about every job I had, I quit because I discovered something illegal going on or immoral going on. And I'd bring it to their attention. And then, of course, they don't want it out. It was sweeping under the rug. And so I quit. And so that was everywhere I worked. And of course, now I feel like, okay, great. I always thought I have my own podcast. I'm my own boss. I can, now I don't have to worry about that. And now I feel like just throwing in the towel because it's in my face now. I have discovered all the corruption over time, more and more and more. And now more corruption's coming on, the scam artists, people using NDEs. They'll come on and tell their NDE light. Then I saw the light and I saw Jesus. He had blue eyes. And then, you know,
Well, and the sad thing about that is I tend to only want people on that I've read their book or I've heard their story, because then I can watch and judge for myself. And the sad part about that is that there are people that have never been on any kind of a podcast, but they have a very interesting story. But, I do have a little bit of reluctance to have somebody on just because if you don't know them, it is hard to judge some of these things until you really start talking to somebody. So it is a challenge. And I think, though, that's our role as a podcaster. Once we get in it, once you get in it, once I've gotten in it, you realize there's a lot of responsibility. And it's a lot of work that people don't realize. They think, oh, it's just a couple hours here and there. But, there's a lot of research that goes into it, reaching out to people and finding the right guests. And really, there's a lot of research, too, and just seeing who's all out there, because there are a lot of people now that have near-death experiences. And yes, finding the right people to come on.
Well, you're
But
going to
you do,
interview
but
me next. And
yes, I'm
I will
interviewing
be a
you.
total different person, because when I get talking about my NDE, I'm like, I'm in the light and I'm like rejoicing. And so I feel like right now it's like you're this angel and I'm this devil on the shoulder. You're all full
Not
of
at all.
hope, and you're young and fresh, and I'm like, rawr. I feel like I'm down. But this is
Give me a
kind of
couple
like,
of years, right?
yeah, I kind of feel like this is when you start a new job, and you're with someone that's experienced, and you come with me, right, and I'm going to show you the ropes, and this person, you're full of hope and excitement about this job is going to be great, and this new person's so burnt out, they're like, oh well, that person's this, and then you'll find out that it's like that. Like this,
I'll
no,
get
no, no,
tainted
don't
over
take away
time.
my hope.
Now, have you shared your story on NDE TV? I know you've shared it elsewhere, but have you actually told it on your show?
um
I know you've
I
shared
talk
bits and
about it all the
pieces.
time. I
Yes.
have one video where I read the first half of my book.
Okay.
Um, but just like put the camera on there and tell my story now.
Mhm.
And I
Because
will, I
you tell it
when you
beautifully.
when you when I do yours, I will take
Hmm.
that and put it in the description on this, and I'll
Wonderful.
bring people to your channel.
And same vice versa. I'll put this
Okay.
in the description as
Okay.
well, and a link, of course, to your channel.
And I really hate to be Debbie Downer, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, because there is so much great to say about
There
this, and
is.
I have for over 2 years, right? It's like I'm in love with in near death experiences, but I take them very seriously, very, very
Right.
seriously. And I want the audience to be aware of the scams, of the frauds. Just don't like, oh, they said this. That's the way heaven is. Oh, they said that. Or, don't lose your negative voice, and just all, big eye, and believe everything, because I don't want them to click on this over here and, oh, ketamine will give you an NDE, and believe that, or anything else that they're going to come up with. Always think for yourself. And, or, oh, they say that abortion's okay because they say NDEers, they tell you what they do, they handpick it. I have friends that are NDEers, and they got these emails and said, answer this questionnaire, and if you fit the mold, we will talk about you and your story, which is book sales, right, during the conference. So they're like, have you had prophetic visions of the future? And so they answer them. Well, guess what? They talk about it in the conference. This is 2019. Robert Mays, who says he's an NDE researcher, is talking about prophetic visions. All it is Trump bashing. Basically, we got to get rid of Trump if we want to have the new world, this fantastic, spiritual world. We got to get rid of Trump. It's all Trump bashing. They use it just like the abortion stuff, just like the ketamine stuff. They want to push something, and so they will say, in the ears say, blah, blah, blah. And I
I don't
hate
think
that
that
so bad.
I don't think that people always realize the bias that they have. And so what I think happens is they're interpreting their near-death experience through their own personal biases. And that is something hard for many of us to step away from. And so I think that that is something for the audience that are watching these is you have to take that into account when you hear them. And that's why I think it's not ever watching just one near-death experience. It's really watching a lot of them, because that's when you get a much bigger sense. And I do get the same sense if anybody gets political one direction or the other. That's something I would want to stay away from, because I don't think God's political. And but again, I think we do get to see this. We do figure it out after watching many of them, and it really is something that we all need to do. We need to be discerning, but we also need to be open-minded, because there are things that I go, I didn't know that before. And then you'll see a few of them say that, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to think about that one. So it's a balance.
See,
between
that's what I
discernment
like
and
about you right there.
open-mindedness.
You are so
Oh,
far ahead of the game before you even get started, because it took me a long time to realize what you just said. And I've talked about that on the show before. And so my conclusion with what you said is I've told people, this exists. So listen to the NDE and then listen to how they interpret it, and
mm-hmm.
what books and what medium they went to that told them this, or the new age stuff they got into, or they're quoting the Bible with it. But separate the near-death experience,
Mm-hmm.
the actual experience they had, from what they're interpreting it into. Now they're back with their brain and their culture and their beliefs. Because we come back with this experience that is totally outside our realm,
Right.
literally outside our realm.
Ineffable.
And then we come back, what the hell? We got to try to make sense of it. And what do we do nowadays? Not when I had mine, but nowadays you can go to the internet. Well, you can get into this group and they will say, oh, here's all these new age books. It'll tell you. And so they see it through a new age lens, or they went to their church and you're seeing it through biblical verses lens or whatever. I said, separate the NDE. If you want the meat, if you want the science, let's listen to the NDE. Then listen to what they did and watch the steps and how they did it. Because often I'll say, so like, did you go to IANS groups afterwards, or did you would go to a medium? You can pick up, usually I'm going to ask them, they'll say the process they went through, and you can see how they get spit out on the other end and what they make of it. So is that the science? No, I don't think so. The science is the actual experience, unfiltered, unbiased. Now some of them, which drives me nuts, they'll start quoting the Bible right in the middle of their NDE, or they'll start talking about other people's NDEs and giving credit to theirs. Like, stop. I want the meat, and I want the
Right.
potatoes and the peas over here. I want the meat. Separate my food here. I want to just feast on that NDE.
And I think also there's biases on both ends, because there's going to be the bias of the person telling it. And then also, as listeners, we also have our own biases. So I think that's why people misinterpret or say, oh, they said this. And it's like, no, that's not really what they said. And so it's kind of both ends. And, that's kind of when you look at the game of telephone, where, you say something and how it changes down the line. And that probably happens with many of these stories. They, people grasp them through their own understanding, and the people telling them, like you said, it's ineffable. I mean, it's something. How do you describe the undescribable and put that into terms that people can understand? So,
and NDEers do it. I have had a good friend that was a famous NDEer, and she says, why is so-and-so so popular? I said, oh, because he was abused as a child and he had this experience. And she goes, this person had told me for years, never abused a child, wonderful family. And I thought, oh my God, she's taking a big drag. I could hear her on the phone, take a big drag of a cigarette. Here it comes. I knew exactly what she was going to do. Well, I was sexually abused by my dad. You were not. I know you. I've talked to you on the phone every day for years. She's never been sexually abused. She's always point blank said that. And now, makes NDEers popular. And she never went public with that. But she kept talking to me about it. I'm like, you're such a liar. And then she would hear somebody else's NDE. Why that? And then one day I was happened to flipping through online, and here she was in a book recently. She said that she lost twins. She stole my NDE.
oh, wow.
She never, no one's told. Other times I talk about losing my twins and my second NDE, never said, oh, I lost twins too. Never. And here she was like, and they're interviewing her on this, and boo hoo. She took my story, not all of my story, but this whole thing with the twins, and then she added some her stuff in it, and then
maybe
I confront her about lying. She's, what's it matter? What's it matter? This is, I want this to be science. I want this to be facts. I want us to dig down deep and get the truth and cut out all the BS and all the fake and all the fraud. And because there's so much information we can get from these NDEs, like you say, the out of body stuff, or what they all see, what they really see. And we're like this close to glimpsing into heaven, like this close. And then we got all this stuff clouding it.
Right. And I guess we have to get through. There are going to be people that make things up. And then we've just got to try to discount those. And
it's hard to be that gatekeeper.
It's hard to be the gatekeeper. But I think that, as you said, you research, and I do the same. I really look into somebody. And I'd rather not have somebody on that has a good story if I'm not certain about it than to have somebody on that tells me something false. Now, it could happen to me. We can all be conned. But so far, I feel like the way I can tell that the people I've interviewed have had a real experience is how they've changed. I mean, so many of them change dramatically, and they become such a loving and kind person. And that's obviously, we're all going to change in different ways. But a lot of that, and in just, giving back, wanting to, you are out there wanting to spread the word and share these near-death experiences. I think it's those kinds of changes that you can say, okay, that's, a genuine experience.
And then too, at the same time, with over like 300 guests, I don't want people to think, oh, Pegi really investigates all her guests, so she has a guest on there. Truthful. I don't want them to think that either, because only person I know who seriously had an NDE is me, because I was there. Not to say I think this is lying, that's lying, I'm the one not lying. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, as a witness, I can only say I know about me. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a polygraph. I'm not doing investigations into all of my guests. It's just this one person was just like so many red flags. And I've had maybe 5 that I'm like, I'm sorry, I just, the lion was just too evident.
But just think of all the good ones you've had.
Yes. But like we was talking about all this positive and this negative, I have learned to embrace the negative and put it into my positive in a useful way, if that makes sense. Instead of like I could just push it away, this is negative, get away. No, because it keeps coming back. And it's like it's this, something needs my attention. Negative isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be,
right.
It needs my attention, and I need to stop and, okay, what is this? And like, all this that I have talked about, and thank you, because you've been my therapy session. This is supposed to be about you, right?
Wonderful.
and that I'm just trying to sort out, where do I go from here?
Right.
How do I make my podcast better? How do I protect my guests? How do I help you? Any kind of words of wisdom I can give you for going forward, and what I have learned up to this point. And I wish you the best of luck. I can see, like, in the future, like you on television doing this is, I mean, you're going to do great. I'm going to still be doing this.
No, you are
me here in Long Bottom, Ohio, but you're gonna go places, girl.
You are so sweet. And I think that what you just expressed is really life in general. There's so many uncertainties in life, and that's probably why people relate to you, because we all have jobs and things where we're not always certain. We're scared sometimes, we're nervous, we feel we messed up. And sometimes we can use that, though, to become better. It's almost like a few of my guests have said, it's like lifting weights. You need the weights, you need the challenges, because that's how you grow your strength. And
I'll tell you something else. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, you have had so many challenges in your life. I mean, you really had an extremely difficult childhood, and you have turned it into something very positive. And that's not something a lot of people can do. And that's probably something a lot of people turn to you to have hope that they can do it as well.
Yeah. I see. I'm not afraid of those topics, rape, child abuse, drug abuse, alcoholism, suicide. We hit it all here, where other channels, I feel like, they're successful because people want that beautiful NDE. They just want to know how beautiful heaven is. They want to hear that we all go to heaven in a little rowboat, is what I call it, that there's no hell. We all get to go to heaven and it's going to be, that's what they come for. That's not what I supply, you know. I'm not going to supply you with a false sense of security because that's not what I'm learning from near death experiences. And that's not what I've learned from my life, that it's all easy and that we all get out of hell free card. And we go there. I mean, and at first people were, I'm not watching this again. I want to hear something beautiful. I didn't want to hear these problems and I didn't want to hear this. I'm like, well, I think, my counseling social work background is just like a natural gravitation for me to pinpoint. They're kind of saying something, but not really saying it. It's like, you were abused as a child, weren't you? Yeah. And so then I don't want to talk about it. 5 minutes later, they go ahead and talk about it. Or they'll say, I never talked about this before. When I was investigator at Children's Services, I learned very quickly I have a knack for getting confessions without even, I'm not trying to, but people's like, how did you get that confession? I didn't mean to. It's just listening to somebody. Everybody really wants to tell their truth. Yes. And so that's just what I try to bring to the table, is to where we can really just tell the truth. And I guess that's what you've allowed me to do. And you're supposed to be interviewing you today. So.
Oh, well, it's been so great talking to you. I really have enjoyed it.
So, all right. So I'm going to get ready and I'll see you in an hour.
That sounds great.
I'm looking forward. Send me a link.
Yes, I'm looking forward to having you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Great to
You'll
have
see
you
a different side of me. I'll get rid of this. And because when I say, when I get talking about my NDE, I'm back there.
Wonderful. So, I can't wait to hear it. All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.